Hey everybody, welcome to another Rackspace Office Hours live stream. My name is Alan, broadcasting live from the Castle, Rackspace's headquarters here in San Antonio, Texas. I am joined by Kent Kingery, who's joining us for the first time on this show. How you doing, Kent?
I'm doing great, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're one of the people that we've wanted to have on for quite a long time.
And I have successfully dodged you for almost a year.
Almost a year now, and that's and we're glad to have finally backed you into a corner and made you come on the show.
That was pretty. That and the check helped.
The check. So. Well, we're not supposed to talk about the check, but we'll keep that quiet. But no, we're super glad to have you on the show because it's a topic that you're going to be able to speak very well to, and it's a topic that I'm excited to share with our audience. And that's about our newest version of Fanatical Support for Microsoft Azure. And this is something that's very exciting for Rackspace and very exciting for you working here at. In that department. So really excited to have that. Hey, saying hi to everybody that's watching us live. If you have any questions while we're speaking, feel free to drop a comment on YouTube or at Twitter. You can use the hashtag BeHelpful or CloudQA, and we'll go ahead and get those set up for you, and we'll answer those questions while we speak. But let's go ahead and get into it, Kent. Let's talk about you. You mentioned we've been trying to get you on the show for about a year. That's because you've been here at Rackspace for about a year.
About a year, yeah, a little over a year.
Tell us a little bit about how you got here to Rackspace.
Sure. So I have been sort of being enticed to Rackspace for many years.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, Jeff DeVerter, that works here, has been after me for a long time to be here.
Absolutely.
And finally, a role opened up that seemed to be a fit. And he took me to breakfast one morning. He said, hey, let me tell you what Rackspace is getting ready to do. We're getting ready to offer Fanatical Support on a third-party public cloud. And I said, well, stop. And I've heard some crazy stuff before, but Rackspace supporting a cloud that they don't control the infrastructure on, they don't create it. How's that going to work? And Jeff looked at me and said, "That's what we want you to join us to figure out how to do it." And that's how I got here.
Well, and as much as I've worked with you, I think that Jeff is a very smart man for making that call and taking you out to breakfast. Yeah, you've been a great asset. I've sat down and talked with you several times, and I just think that you really understand that world. You've been working in Microsoft services for quite a while, right?
Gosh, 30 years.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about some of the other things that you've worked on.
Yeah. Well, I started my career with IBM, and at that point, Microsoft's still a small company doing stuff for our PC line, but I got to work with the guys that built the C compilers, and got to work with guys that were building product, the first versions of Word, things like that. And over the years, I've kind of gone back and forth between working for companies and working for myself, had my own consulting firm for a while. And always through that, there's been the connection to Microsoft and watching Microsoft mature from, applications that you and I would use at home to becoming this enterprise powerhouse.
Right.
So it's been an exciting journey. So.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, again, we're super happy to have you on, and looking forward to this. One thing that I do want to kind of check into is let's talk a little bit about this offering, right? The reason that you're here at Rackspace and here today to talk to us. So let's talk a little bit about what this offering entails.
Sure. Well, we have called this essentially a relaunch of our Azure support capabilities. So you'll recall the last year at Worldwide Partner Conference in July, almost a year now,
right at a year.
We announced the first sort of version of this, and it was centered around our ability to support primarily internet as infrastructure as a service types of activities, et cetera. This new offering does a couple of things for us. It increases the kinds of parts of Azure that we support, but it also puts our service offering into two very distinct levels, Aviator and Navigator, and probably familiar with it from what we do for AWS.
Right, exactly, and that makes all the sense in the world. We have this very distinct way of referencing how we're going to support you via either Aviator or Navigator, and so why not just use that across all of the different clouds that we support? And that's really what we're moving toward, is this making our customers able to do what they need to do to build their business and use the technology that makes sense for them.
And making it easier to consume our offerings in a way that's consistent.
Right.
So if they are in multi-cloud strategy, right, and they do have Aviator and Navigator and AWS, it just makes sense for us to have a similar offering inside the Azure space to achieve some sort of parity with them.
Exactly.
So, absolutely.
Well, and let's go ahead and define those, right? So Aviator and Navigator, it's a great analogy, right?
Sure.
So Aviator would be like actually flying the plane for you, right? Whereas Navigator is more giving you guidance on where to go.
Absolutely.
Right.
We're sort of the co-pilot in Navigator versus actually flying the plane.
Right.
And the idea or the goal is with Navigator to provide a level of offering to our customers that don't need that hands-on, very deep touch support. But what they do want is they want access to our guidance. They want access to our knowledge, our thought leadership, some of the tooling that we have developed to make deploying into Azure and supporting Azure easier. That sort of thing is what Navigator is really about. I mean, I kind of call it low touch, although nothing at Rackspace is really low touch. We still engage directly with the customers and we support the Azure platform. But once it gets to your specific VMs, for example, applications, we're really not doing as much of that. That's really in your
and your team working with that. You mentioned the tooling. Let's talk a little bit about some of those, the ways that we're able to do this, because I mean, we did have to build out some tooling to make this possible. Can you give us some examples of that?
Absolutely. So we have built out a series of deployment tooling that's primarily around PowerShell and Azure Resource Manager templates. There's this thing called ARM, basically the ability for you to describe in a JSON file your entire IT environment, whether that is VMs or virtual networking or web applications or Azure SQL databases, and be able to take that and then deploy it into Azure consistently over and over again. So if you ever need to rebuild it or you need to put it in another subscription or another region or whatever, you have the ability to take that thing and just continue to cookie.
Well, and that's been key. That's been key for our our customers. We have it through OpenStack, Heat templates, CloudFormation on AWS, and ARM here at Microsoft and Azure. And that's what you need to do to be able to, like you said, consistently. And you do it consistently, you get it right every time. And that's
well, what we're after, right, is we're after the software-defined data center. We're after the ability to stop having to worry about wires and cables and racks and that sort of thing, and be able to treat it just like we would software with the same sort of controls and disciplines that we do around DevOps. Your shirt says it right here. Right?
It does,
that's what it ends up being. But it's DevOps not necessarily just around the application, but now it's around the actual operating platform itself.
Exactly, and to be able to lift that out of one data center to move it into another or wherever you want to, and just completely replicate it. That helps customers win. I mean, that's really what we want to do. We want our customers to succeed, because we can't succeed.
Absolutely. Some of the other tooling we've done is we have the ability to take Azure's native monitoring capabilities, OMS and operational insights, and we have connected that up to our internal incident management systems, our ticketing systems, et cetera. So the things that are happening in Azure can generate tickets inside of our system that our support engineers can pick up off the queue, just like a normal ticket that we would get in any other part of Rackspace. And that's a huge accomplishment for us, a huge advantage to our customers, because they're using the same ticketing system that they're used to, perhaps dedicated or somewhere else.
Well, and that allows us to help serve them better, because if we're talking about multi-cloud customers, we're not talking about net new customers that are only on Azure. I mean, we have some of them, but we also are looking at some of our customers that were trying to manage on their own multiple different accounts. And now we're able to say, look, we have a great idea of what you're doing here at Rackspace. We know what your business is. We know what your plans are. Now, the same account teams that are working with Rackspace infrastructure can, work on the same tickets as everybody else. So I mean, being able to cross talk that way is really helpful.
Well, and that's interesting you bring that up. Our existing customers, so we want to have new customers come to us all the time. We're always out talking to companies that are not our customers for whatever reason. But we're also looking at customers that are in one area of our business that really could benefit from Azure. So for example, as you know, we have a private cloud business around Microsoft that's Hyper-V and System Center, those kinds of things. And what Azure allows us to do is provide a customer the ability to have a hybrid experience, right? To be able to connect up to Azure to either fail over or to burst when there's capacity needs, that sort of thing.
If you're already a Microsoft shop, I mean, that's the thing. You're running your own private cloud here at Rackspace, right? Where we're handling that for you. And then you can burst into that Azure cloud. Same way that you can if you're running Rackspace private cloud, you can burst into the OpenStack public cloud that we have here. So it's the same type of availability.
But that's an interesting point to note about Azure, is that over 30% of the workloads that are running in Azure today are running on Linux. So it isn't just the Microsoft customer, right? It is the Red Hat customer. It's the Ubuntu customer. It is someone who is running a LAMP stack, application. So there's a huge advantage to that, and it isn't just our private cloud. It's anybody that really could use that capability inside Azure.
So I didn't realize that. So that's 30% of the workload?
It's over 30% now. It's running Linux. In fact, we have some Azure customers, Alan, that are 100% Linux. They have no Windows at all. So if you were to go in and look at their environment, look at their networking, they're running, Hadoop on a Linux box, or they're running, WordPress, or they're running those kind of things on Linux with no Windows to be found.
And what's the draw of Azure for that?
Well, the draw of Azure is a couple of things. I think it is the tooling and the capability that Microsoft has provided. It is the geographic disbursement of the data centers, and it really is that Microsoft has done a lot of work to make sure that the Linux workloads run efficiently and effectively in Azure. So that's great. And I can tell you that I have several Azure subscriptions personally, and a lot of what I run in there is Linux, and I love it. It runs great. Microsoft has support for those things. They have a team of engineers just like we do.
It's amazing. I mean, it is not your grandfather's Microsoft anymore.
Not at all.
Yeah, no. .NET runs on Linux now, and so it's
and that's the exciting part. Right? So if you get to the application level things, right? .NET Core, whatever they're calling it now, ASP.NET Core runs in the Linux environment, and so now you have some parity across all your platforms at the application level.
They just opened up the beta for MS SQL on Linux as well. So
boy, you want to talk about not ever expecting to see that happen. When I saw that announcement, well, and I can tell you when I think things changed. I remember seeing last year, probably before I joined Rackspace for sure, March or April, Satya Nadella was sitting at a conference, and back in the background on the big screen behind him was the phrase "Microsoft Hearts Linux." And I turned to my wife and I said, "Okay, hell is officially
was it
frozen
April 1st
over."
when you saw this? It's
exactly.
That's something you would never expect to see, and it's certainly not from Ballmer's Microsoft, but it's a different Microsoft now.
Well, I think there's a recognition though that Microsoft is about computing.
Right.
It isn't necessarily just about Windows. Let's be clear. They still make, I'm sure, a significant revenue from Windows. But if you take a look at what Azure is really about, it's about utility computing.
Right.
And just like your electric utility, the electric company doesn't really care what you're doing to spin the dial as long as the dial is spinning.
You could be making margotaritas in a blender, or you could be turning on the ceiling fan. They don't care. They don't care. Yeah, as long as you're making kilowatts. Yeah. That's all they care about. Well, so that's great. Let's take this time, because we've significantly gotten off track, and welcome everybody that's watching live. Thank you for watching. This is Rackspace, the #1 managed cloud company. I'm Alan Bush. This is Kent Kingery. We're watching Office Hours, our weekly live stream. We're talking about Fanatical Support for Azure. We've been doing this for about a year now, and now we've made some changes to it, and it's some great changes, positive changes, and we're talking about that right now. If you do have a question, drop us a comment in YouTube or Google Plus or wherever you're watching. We'd be happy to answer it for you, either now live or in the future. If you're watching, tell us how the future looks. We're really excited to hear about that. And so that's what we're doing. So we're talking about some of the changes, right? So we're talking about the two different service levels, right? Navigator, where we're talking about helping people to see that landscape, to see the ways that they can do it. And then Aviator, we take a little bit more hands-on approach. Let's talk a little bit about how we roll up our sleeves. And
I would say we take a lot more hands-on approach with Aviator, up to and including getting into sessions with customers around designing their infrastructure in Azure, looking at their applications to determine how those workloads can translate to Azure, what features of Azure make sense. Is it better to put your databases in SQL Server in a traditional VM, or is it better to use Azure SQL Database, which is a PaaS feature? Right. So I think that for us, Aviator really represents that very deep, very hands-on, very high-touch sort of capability. And so our team is made up of a lot of different types of folks. We obviously have the 24/7 by 365 support engineers, both Windows and Linux. We obviously have our normal sorts of product engineers that sort of build out our tooling and build our capabilities around Azure. But we also have solution architects that are specific to the Azure environment, that know Azure, that understand how the workloads translate.
Well, and they live and breathe that. And that's what they work every day.
And they work in conjunction with our sales teams, with our account management teams, in order to be able to take the customer on that journey. Because that's what I'm ultimately concerned about, right? Is what does that journey look like for a customer who's coming to this and trying to figure out how to incorporate Azure or embrace Azure for the very first time. And of course, we obviously work very closely with Microsoft as well. We have a huge relationship with them.
We've been recognized several times for several consecutive years for our partner relationship. So
we've had a deep relationship. I mean, over 12, 13, 14 years, we've had a huge relationship with them. We tend to see things early. We tend to be able to call up Microsoft when we have problems. And in fact, that's what we do for our customers. If we can't solve the issue ourselves at a platform level, we escalate right to Microsoft.
We have those escalation lines. Exactly.
And we quarterback that for the customer. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
that's good. I think the other big change that was coming down was that we've actually now launched in Europe. So we were in Microsoft's US-based data centers, and now we are across Europe as well.
Yeah, and so there what we've done is we have really worked very closely with our UK counterparts. A great team over there, really focused on how do we start to get that next beachhead of customer support. We've been able to support a customer based in the US in any region in Azure since the beginning. But what's different now is that we can actually go into the country and sell to customers and support customers in the country itself.
Great. Okay, that makes sense.
And there's a lot of great stories coming out of that. There's a lot of, I think, pent-up demand in that area, a lot of interest. The stories that we're hearing and sort of the pipeline that we're seeing of work that's coming is really, really very positive. And Microsoft, of course, loves the fact that we're moving into an area where they are. So yeah, it's been very, very, very good for us.
Well, good. Well, great. Yeah, that's great to hear. So it's not just launching in the data centers, because a U.S. customer could have set up overseas, but now it's the ability to service the customers that are
there. And that's the key point. And I will say also that we do have some reach into even Australia at this point. I mean, we have customers and interest from Australia. So it isn't just the European side. It is us getting out of the US and from a customer perspective starting to broaden that horizon.
Great. Love to see that. Can you tell us about some of the customer success stories that we've had? What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite, or do you have someone that stands out to you?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of favorites. One that is very near and dear to my heart is a customer that I work with pretty closely, who has been interested in moving their sort of provisioning of their environments and their management of their environments from the developers, from the IT glass house, down to closer to the business, to the QA, to the people that are actually doing the work. And we have spent significant time with this customer building out some customized portal capabilities. I'm using these things we talked about, ARM templates, to basically define a set of pre-designed sorts of environments where a user can go in and pick from a list of these templates and deploy with no intervention and no even need to really be in the Azure portal itself. Being able to do that, being able to spin those down automatically, spin them up automatically, kill them in the evening. They have automation jobs that run in order to save cost and save complexity. So every night at 6, 7, 8, and 9, these jobs run and begin to turn off portions of their environment. And every morning, turn it right back up again. So
that's great.
That's been a great success story because it has allowed them, I think, to be more efficient, a little bit more control on their part. And now we obviously have other customers that have expressed an interest in being able to do that same thing. So the learnings that we've done with that customer, we're taking to others. So
that's great.
Yeah, I think the other one that's really interesting to me is, again, around sort of the Linux capabilities. The customer that has come to us, a customer has come to us and said, I'm really only running Linux. That's all I'm really doing. It's all I really want to do at all. And, so I'm going to go look at, pick your flavor, AWS, whatever it happens to be. And the sales team got in and said, hey, wait a second, let's talk about what that might look like on Azure. So in the process, we have a couple of really brilliant, Linux support guys. We've worked with them to try and work out what does it mean for Rackspace to securely access things in that Linux environment, taking the learnings that we obviously have here. I mean, you can't, I told somebody the other day, you can't throw a rock in this place without hitting 10 Linux engineers as you're walking down the hallway.
Absolutely. Well, it bounces and it skips across.
It does. But the key to that is being able to leverage information and knowledge that we already have and use that for our customers to start to drive their adoption of Azure around their Linux environments. And that's been really, really gratifying to see. And we have a few more of those, sort of lined up. I was actually, quite frankly, even though I knew about the Linux footprint in Azure, I was really surprised at the uptake we've seen from it, positively. So
great. Great. Well, speaking of the customers, we got a question that came in from Tyler, it looks like. It said that you mentioned support for customers who are new to the Azure cloud. Can you take us through the steps that the onboarding process for the offering? Does it differ for technical versus non-technical customers?
Okay, so let me take you through
what the
onboarding
whole thing
looks like, and then we can.
I've
talk
signed
about
up for Azure.
Sure.
Let's go.
You've actually come to us one of two ways into Azure. You've either brought us a subscription you already have. You either have a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, or you've basically done the credit card swipe, what we call the pay-as-you-go subscription, and you bring that to us, and we basically ingest that subscription and create credentials for us to operate in it.
I see.
And the onboarding process is all about us helping you through setting those up, setting up monitoring, understanding what workloads you want to try and move in. So we actually go through a full implementation call with a customer. That is whether the customer is technical or non-technical. The other way that you can come to us for Azure is we actually have the ability through what's called a CSP agreement, Cloud Service Provider Agreement. We have the ability to resell the Azure infrastructure. And so if you come to us with that, then there's less hassle. You simply ask us, hey, we want to do Azure. We create that for you, put you in that environment. But as far as the consumption goes for you, it doesn't matter how you bring it. It looks the same, and our offering is the same.
Okay.
Right, the way that we support you. Now, the question is interesting about a technical customer versus a non-technical customer. We do have a number of customers who come to us who are, I would say, kind of born in the cloud, sort of software as a service companies, but they're not really technical. They contract out their technical work, but most of the people who work for the business itself are really not. And so for those kind of customers, we have a full team of people that can walk them through the process of spinning up an environment, creating the templates. And in fact, so much so that you, as an Azure customer, if you're not technical, you might never even see the inside of Azure. You simply just say, hey, here's what I want to do. And we go off. I call it the Azure elves, right? The Azure elves go off overnight and create this thing and put it out there for you and provide you the credentials and the information you need to operate.
You wake up one morning and there's an entire infrastructure built out for you.
Now we do have, for the technical customer, we obviously have the ability to go much, much deeper if they have much more technical requirements, or if they are actually wanting assistance from Rackspace in migrating an environment in or transferring a workload through professional services, and we have that capability.
I can see that being the case where you would have a customer who might have assumed a larger workload from another department within the same company, absorbing another company into thing, and now you've got to merge all these different environments together, and having it under one umbrella would probably help that.
Well, and I think that's interesting you bring it up, because I was just talking to a customer a couple of weeks ago who has acquired a company and has now made it a division of their company, and this is actually probably their first test case into Azure, and it makes sense because they have this company has largely Microsoft workloads. They have largely Microsoft development, and so Azure seems to make sense. But the bigger company, the parent company, is definitely multi-cloud. They're doing OpenStack, they're doing AWS, they're doing a little bit of Google. So it makes sense for them to be able to come to us and say, "We need your help on this first Azure workload." Now, I expect over time that customer becomes more sophisticated. What they really need us for is platform support, our deep relationship with Microsoft, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So,
well, that makes sense. That's good. It's really all about understanding what the customer needs, what the customer is trying to accomplish, and finding the best way for them to succeed in that.
You bet. Well, and if you think about the pace of change of the public clouds, and certainly Azure is no different. I mean, we're seeing changes coming sometimes weekly, where we are spending our time staying up to date on that stuff where the customer doesn't have to.
Right, exactly. And that allows the customer to focus on their business, and on whatever it is they do, they can focus on their business, and we're going to worry about those technical details that could bog you down for a long time.
Well, and look, we've been in that environment in the IT industry for 25 years, right, where we've wanted for IT not to be a major discipline. We really want IT just to be an enabler.
Exactly.
And the more that we can get to, again, things like these software-defined data centers, the template management, all of the tooling that goes around automating, not only the applications, but other things, we get closer and closer to that world. So.
Exactly. Well, that's really what we want, and we're getting there. You mentioned kind of making the IT be the enabler. One thing that I've seen a lot of people were initially excited about, if nothing else, for just the ability to use Azure to do Active Directory or something like that. You have customers that do that just to not have to support the Active Directory.
We do, and of course, obviously, our connection with our Cloud Office discipline and Office 365 and some of the things that we're doing there, Exchange, SharePoint, etc. That is going to become a bigger and bigger part of what we do. We actually are working on an offering that is going to sort of wrap managed identity up around Active Directory in Azure. And basically put that out there as a capability that we can not only offer professional services around, but also the same level of Fanatical Support, monitoring, et cetera. We don't really, to be honest, we don't really have a customer that I'm aware of, except for the Linux-only workloads, that don't have an Active Directory presence. When you spin up an Azure subscription, you have Azure Active Directory whether you want it or not.
Exactly.
But more and more customers are finding that single sign-on capabilities, those sorts of things, make it very easy for them to consume that.
And I think that's the big benefit there is if you're already in an Active Directory situation, like being able to integrate that is gonna help you manage your cloud now a lot better. And if you don't, then you gain that ability to do that. And I would imagine that you can use that to kind of funnel or to manage different access levels, right? So you're my developer, you could access this cluster of servers and only this cluster of servers, whereas you're my IT administrator and you can go over here.
That whole concept of role-based access and role-based capabilities is being pushed down. And what we're finding is that some of our customers, in fact, many that I think are coming down the pipe to us, are coming to us with applications that are using Active Directory internally and are trying to figure out a way to connect Active Directory in Azure with the Active Directory on the premise. So this customer that I mentioned earlier, the one that I've worked with quite a bit, they actually have a very interesting setup in that they have Active Directory running very traditionally in a VM in Azure, but it is syncing with Azure Active Directory to be able to allow them to do VPN sorts of authentication and so forth, but then also authenticate from the outside. And it's actually a very, very powerful capability for them, and it's very, very easy to administer and maintain. So,
good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how to, how to get started with Azure, Fanatical Support for Azure. So, we've mentioned we have a lot of existing customers that are bringing new workloads to us. We have a lot of brand new customers that are coming over. So tell us kind of some of the different ways you can find out a little bit more about it.
Sure. We obviously on the Rackspace website have a space there underneath our cloud computing capabilities that talks about Azure, so you can get some very basic information there. A lot of our newer customers are coming to us from either their Microsoft rep, if they're an enterprise customer, or if they've attended a conference somewhere where they've seen Microsoft and Rackspace present together. So there are a number of ways to get to us, but ultimately it all sort of ends up in the same place with one of our salespeople or what we call a sales overlay, an Azure specialist, sort of reaching out and trying to figure out, is this really the right fit? Because I'll be honest, let's be clear. One of the things that's nice about Rackspace is that we do support multiple different clouds, and we're after what's right for the customer, not necessarily the Microsoft story or the Amazon story, but what's right for our customers. And sometimes the workload might make sense in Azure, it might make sense in AWS, it might make sense on OpenStack, it might have all three. And so that's that consultative sales model that we want to do, is understand really, we don't want to sell you a hammer. Well, we want to help you do carpentry, right? That's the goal.
Well, it's a different analogy, but I remember one of the first conversations we had, you told me a story about your father's tailor and the way that he was very consultative. Do you mind sharing that again?
Yeah. So
because I think it absolutely applies.
Absolutely. So my dad was an impeccably dressed person. I'll tell you, the acorn fell very far from the tree, but my dad was always tailored. And he had a tailor that he went to, a guy that he bought his suits from, who he had finally found after a lot of effort. He would go into a department store and try to buy a suit, and he would get the off the rack and, you know, not get a lot of help. And his tailor was very consultative in that he started asking him questions, probably like 200 different questions. What kind of suits do you like? What kind of cloth do you like? Where do you go in your suits? What do you, what seasons are you in? That sort of thing. And over time, this tailor had built up what I call now a dossier. I mean, probably better than the CIA would have about my dad's likes and dislikes. And the beauty of it is that not only could he help my father on the journey to they had a relationship over something like 50 years, right? As styles changed, lapels got narrower, lapels got wider, ties got this, whatever. That guy was able to basically help my dad roll with the changes and be able to constantly keep that look fresh, keep that look up to date. And it's just, it's a perfect, as you said, analogy of what we try to do here.
Right, exactly. We want you to look your best, whether that is wearing a suit. We might not be the best ones to consult for that, but you know, when you want to look the best for your customers, for your employees, when you want that, we want to be able to provide you with the best answers. And that's why it's, I think, so important for us to have this multi-cloud world where we have customers that are on AWS for part of their workload and on OpenStack and then on Azure for other parts. And like, we want to have those options there, and we want to be able to provide the best advice.
Right.
Well,
and I think there are customers that come for a couple of reasons for the multi-cloud. One is they don't want to be tied in right to a specific one, so that if they have an issue here or an issue there, they have an issue in a data center in the West Coast, they have another provider that's there. But I'll tell you the other reason they come is they come because the reality is that each of these cloud providing platforms has some strengths, right? Has some things that they do better than others. And so being able to do that picking and choosing and that capability of almost internally in a company acting as a brokerage right around these cloud services is extraordinarily important. And so they're looking to us. The word I would always say is they're looking to us for advice. Right. They come to us for advice and counsel because that's what we spend our time doing. We know the platform. We have a whole team of people that spends their time researching it and experimenting with it, doing proof of concepts around it. And most of the time, if not all the time, we're able to say, hey, that thing you're trying to do, that catalog application you're getting ready to build will work perfectly here in the Azure environment. But this other thing, this inventory piece that you have to go with your cataloging might be better suited for a part of it to be in Azure and a part of it to be in AWS, or a part of it to be in Azure and a part of it still remain on your premise because you have data sovereignty concerns or security concerns, that sort of thing.
And we want to be that trusted partner. And when we have a 10-year relationship with a customer, and you've had a handful of account managers over that 10 years that really get to know the business and say, oh, hey, I know you mentioned that you have a new initiative coming out, and let's look at the different places where we can run this workload from.
Sure. Well, and the converse of that is, here are some new features that are coming down the pike in Azure. How does that apply to make what we're already doing better? So Azure Container Service is a great example, right? How would that help you? Or Azure Service Fabric for microservices, right? Those sorts of things. What does that mean to you? What does it look like to you? We do have, I would say the vast majority of our customers, because of the kinds of customers we tend to deal with, are very much in the traditional IT world. It's virtual machines and it's databases and it's web apps and a little bit of automation. But we do have many that are starting to push the envelope, and we're starting to run right alongside of them to keep up with them.
Oh, that's great.
And nowhere is that truer than in IaaS versus PaaS, the infrastructure as a service versus platform as a service, which is a little new for us in this newer offering. Being able to support essentially platform without having to worry about the servers or the VMs or any of that. You want a web app? Here's a web app. It connects to a database. It connects to this thing here. So covering both of those for our customers.
What aspects of Azure are you most excited about?
Oh boy, that's an interesting one. So I come from a development environment, right? I come from a development background, 30 years. And so I'm always interested in anything that can help me better create applications to better serve my customers. And probably the two things that I'm most excited about are Azure Service Fabric, which is the underlying fabric that Azure itself runs on. So we've been using Azure Service Fabric without even knowing it as part of the platform.
It's just now been exposed.
It's now been exposed to us to be able to use. And that's really Microsoft's ability to sort of capitalize on the microservice trend. It's kind of a buzzword, but it really is a valid way of creating applications, creating systems. And so that's one. The other one is Azure Container Services, the ability to do things that we've been doing in things like Docker, et cetera. Microsoft has done quite a bit of work with Mesos, et cetera, to build out that capability. And why it's exciting is that it provides an application viewpoint or an application functionality that heretofore really hasn't been necessarily the domain of a Microsoft customer, right? Certainly Linux and those sorts of things, you've seen that, but this is now really more, geared toward the Microsoft traditionalist who is now looking to re-architect their app. Because like we got some customers that have apps that have been running in the same fashion for 10 years.
I'm familiar with
I'm sure you are. Yeah.
with that.
I call it the creaky old ASP.NET 2.0, right?
Right. So. Exactly. I need to have this that's been end of life for 7.5 years.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll see about that. I think that you mentioned that there are a lot of people that you're working with that are really in the enterprise, that are running big enterprise applications, not necessarily web services. I think that they are on these applications that have a long history, and it's going to take a lot to get them off of that. So I think that there's probably a lot of people that are excited about the possibility of containers, but aren't quite ready to use them in production yet, and aren't quite ready. Sure. So having that available to them as a service, right? So they can play around with them. I think that's got to be very beneficial to them in that same environment where they've got all of their production stuff. They can just spin up a little test environment and say, let's play with containers and see what we can do with it.
Well, the beauty of it is, like any of this software-defined data center kind of activity is, you get it in there, you experiment with it a little bit, and you say to yourself one afternoon, wow, it's really not how I wanted to do this at all. In a traditional, sort of rack of hardware environment on your premise, you've gone out and bought a bunch of servers and put them out there. And now you still have all this investment in this infrastructure. Whereas with Azure, you go delete the thing and you say, it never existed.
Exactly.
Or you take one of these templates that we've talked about and you make a minor change to it and you redeploy it, and it reconfigures the environment for you.
Exactly.
Right. And that's very, very powerful. And I think also what it's done is it has really started to enable sort of the movement in the industry, right? We've kind of gone back and forth. The IT glass house and then back to the business. IT glass house, back to the centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized. And I think we're moving back again now toward almost decentralized, not from the point of the actual operating platform, but more about the management of the platform. And so, I keep looking at your shirt because the DevOps thing for me is a big deal, right? We've now decided that this whole idea of bifurcating, of striating our stack and having the one dude that does this versus the one dude or dudette that does this, right? We've now started to say, hey, this is a continually fluid thing that we're doing.
And working all the way through that stack together.
You bet. And Azure keeps continuing to come out with capabilities. Microsoft continues to put that out there. Because look, at the end of the day, they started off life as a company that enabled developers, right? I think we all remember Steve Ballmer running around the stage, developers.
I vaguely remember.
You may not be old enough to remember.
No, I might have a gift for you.
Well, that and the mind has an incredibly healing process to sort of block that out.
Yeah.
But the reality is that those kinds of customers that have lived in that Microsoft ecosystem forever and have built that stuff in their premise have actually found that they can largely pick that stuff up and move it without making a lot of change. So let me tell you why I think that's critical. You're talking about the new capabilities, containers, whatever. But getting into Azure initially, just the introduction to it needs to be as frictionless as possible. And so if I have an inventory application running on ASP.NET and I'm running it in a traditional Windows server, Windows 2008 R2 server under IIS, I can actually pick that and move it right into a VM doing the same thing. The very next portion of that journey might be that application can move into a web app, a platform as a service capability with very little adjustment, right? So Microsoft has made it easy to maintain that investment. At the same time, once you're in there, then all of a sudden you have all these other capabilities that you can take use of, and it's easy to carve off small pieces of your workload or your app and begin to experiment.
Well, and you can say, hey, stop working all week long on maintaining this server that's running our database. We're going to put that onto a platform as a service. Now you can really work on tuning the database and finding the valuable data within that database. That's one of the things that our CTO, John Engates, he was on with his annual predictions for the cloud for this year. And one of the things he said was, finding ways to use the data that you already have.
Right.
And, we have customers that have massive amounts of data that they've accumulated, but the people that have access to that data are spending all of their time maintaining their databases,
getting access to the data.
Exactly.
Right?
And so if you can stop worrying about that and put that off onto another service, right? Now you free up that person that has looked at that data for years, and now they can say, okay, what would you want to do? Like ask that person. That's the person that you want to know. That's the person that's lived in that data, that understands it better than anybody else. Say, hey, now that you don't have to worry about running this database itself, what do you want to do? Let's do something fun.
Well, and the idea of being able to put that data somewhere. So if Azure has, Microsoft has within Azure, essentially an Internet of Things hub.
Right.
So let's say that you're an oil and gas company, and you've got, all of these, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sensors that are out in your fields or in your production environment, whatever. Being able to now very simply connect that up to the public cloud, being able to push your data in as you need to. It's just a simple process. It's a hub, right? You just continue to push the data in. And then all of a sudden, once a month, you want to be able to run your Hadoop type of work on it, or Microsoft's version of that HDN site. You spin that up, you run it against the data that's out there in storage, you create it, and maybe even you take the results of that and push it back into your internal systems, right? Because you're connected to Azure in your internal environment. You don't need to leave it out there. Storage is cheap, right, in the public cloud. Being able to get it out there is fairly simple. Run it on a scheduled basis, kill the environment when you're done, and now you've got meaningful data that your folks can use to do analytics.
Because you're not running it all the time. You're not running it 730 some odd hours a month. Right. You're running it for the 5
Well, as would be the case if you did premise, right? So I used to work for a company that did that had a big data analytics platform. These 32-way NUMA type hardware systems. And we had a whole separate part of the data center where this thing ran because it needed its own power and its own cooling, et cetera. But we were invested into the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars to put this in. And when it was running idle, it was running idle.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing else going on because it was very bespoke. Whereas in Azure, public cloud, you basically spin the thing up out of a template, turn it on, tell it to go do its work, maybe let it run over the weekend. You come back on a Monday and you say, now I'm done with it, shut it off. And you're paying for the pieces that you need to use while still getting
when
the
you're
same
using
advantage.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's it. Absolutely. that's exactly it. All right. So what else? What else have we talked about? We talked about Europe and elsewhere, right? So being able to help customers elsewhere. We talked about Aviator and Navigator. What else are the big changes in Azure 2.0?
So I think that the next big change for us is, I think, the level of support that we're offering, sort of the detail that we can. I mean, obviously, as we get more repetitions with customers around things that they're doing and start to develop some analysis around what are the common things we start to hear, our support team gets better. And trust me, these guys are top notch. I mean, you know other support teams inside Rackspace. Any Rackspace customer who's dealt with our Fanatical Support is very, very clear about what they get from our Fanatical Support folks, and the Microsoft Cloud team is no different. And so I think what's happening is we are building out that capability. We are expanding that team. We have a relatively new director of operations, and we have expanded the people that are sort of leadership in that side. And let me tell you something, it's just, I think, all going to make a much better experience for the customer, so that when they call in, they have an Azure need. Not only do they know that we're there, but that we have people who can quarterback this thing until it's
absolutely on the Azure side of things, but also the entire Microsoft practice area is just been booming lately, right? So we're talking about you mentioned Office 365, some of those collaboration tools from the the very end users of your corporation, right? All the way
Right.
through to like the cloud applications, to the Hyper-V, you mentioned that before,
Absolutely.
Microsoft private clouds.
That is still a very, very big part of our practice. And then, without tipping too much, I mean, it is public knowledge that Microsoft's about to release Azure Stack to be able to put parity with the public Azure environment into a data center. And certainly Rackspace will be participating in that. There'll be more to come. I'll look forward to coming back in a few months to talk about
the invitation is
and,
open. Yes.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I guess we'll leave it on that. It's a great place to end it. Lots of good stuff to come. Right. Absolutely. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Kent. It was great to have you on.
Thank you for having me here.
Finally made you do it.
Let's let it not be a year.
We will. So we'll get you on before that. Just want to say thanks to everybody that watched and or listened to the audio podcast after the fact. You can get that audio podcast at ohpodcast.com. Check out a whole bunch of back archives as well. We do this every Thursday live, 1 o'clock Central Time, right here on Rackspace YouTube. So we'll see everybody again next week. Take it easy.
See you guys.